of kind of restoring habitats, so to speak. Everything's assessed pretty regularly, like a regular rotation. Your triple SI officer from Natural England comes round, and you every sort of, even within your compartment, habitats are kind of categorized and scored, and then you get an overall grade. And I think there's 5 or 6 condition assessments, down from favorable at the top down to essentially kind of destroyed or in disrepair, beyond repair. I can't remember what the technical term is. And 7 or 8 years ago, I think we fell into the category of unfavorable. Basically, there's sometimes not a lot between some of those categories. It might just be 1 or 2 little pieces of habitat, but I think for us it was that there's 2 things that make the site really special and give it that triple SI. I think the whole coast, the whole dune system, it's the biggest dune system in England. That's one of the things. So you've got a sand dune habitat. The other thing we've got here is the heathland. So maritime heath, or like a coast, so heather near to the sea on sand like that. And that's one of the rarest habitats in Europe, basically. So it's those 2 things together. And if something's sort of slowly interfering with the quality of those habitats, they just slowly degrade over time. And golf courses, being what they are, a slow change, whether it's vegetation, trees, whatever, this little slow creep, and it's not something that people necessarily notice, but I think over time there's a lot of excess vegetation, trees, and slowly but surely, slowly but surely, leaf litter falls off, just begins to decompose. The soil that's quite acidic and then begins to sort of change in its nature, and then that whole thing starts to change the nature of the site, and that starts to threaten those key indicator species. And so I think that they felt like at that point in time it was unfavourable, and that's how it was classified. And basically what that means is, without any change to a management regime, you're not going to change the condition of that particular compartment. So as triple SIs go, in the interim, it so happened that the government decided that they wanted to see a lot more triple SIs in favourable condition, so they ramped up quite a lot of the assessment, and those officers became a lot more sort of diligent around things, where they wanted to see proactive management. And when you are a triple SI landowner or occupier like we are, you are legally obliged to do what you can do to keep it as near as possible to favourable condition. And so that's what we kind of set out to change when I first came along. There was a number of things that we felt tied in really well with that. A lot of it was condition of playing surfaces, reduction of organic matter, trying to introduce a lot more fine grass, and we just felt all of it was a really good project from the sustainability point of view, not just for the golf course and how authentic it was and the triple SI, but just like future proofing it as a business. Yourself, like a lot of things around legislation, products, labour, capital investments. You're trying to make the best of what you've got, and from our point of view, fine grasses, particularly on a site like this where we can get the conditions right, we felt like that was going to give us the best package, like overall, into the future. So yeah, it was like a multi sort of pronged plan. There was the triple SI, trying to restore the quality of the habitats and the overall balance of the course, and then we were looking at things like, we started to look at things like water security. We needed a whole new source of water for our irrigation system, so we put what we call a horizontal well in this area. So it's like a dewatering system. Uses our quite shallow aquifer of water that we've got. Believe it or not, although we're on sand, there is a clay layer about 50 foot down, which does trap a little bit of water above it. And sometimes in winter, when it's rained a fair bit, you'll see it in the bottom of the bunkers. But actually, what we're doing is trying to tap into that. And other than what gets lost to evaporation or the grass plant takes up, we're really kind of recycling our own water, so to speak. So kind of multiple projects have gone on over the time, and that's why we entered the Gulf Environment Awards. We felt like this whole kind of restoration of the infrastructure and the triple SI and all these things were some things that that took a lot of time, took a lot of effort, took a lot of money in some cases, but it's one of those situations where can you afford not to do it, and then also looking into the future, how are you gonna face some of these legislative changes that should have mentioned that. I've got a environmental background, so I've got an environmental science degree, um, and it was when I was doing my environmental science degree that I fell into greenkeeping as a bit of a summer job, because I saw it as something that had a bit of a similar skill set, but really it was just somewhere that was local to me where I could be outside, and I always loved being outside. And the two things have just sort of combined ever since. I mean, when I was in Lincolnshire quite early on, it was one of the first. I think it was on the really very early onset of the Gulf Environment Awards where I remember they won it at Kenwick Park when I was there, and and that sort of led to people realizing that if you could have greenkeepers with somebody in the team that also had that second skill set of being able to look at it from an environmental point of view. So yeah, I mean, ever since then, I've kind of had that string to my bow, so to speak. Yeah, and I think that's a good balance. You're obviously working with agronomists, you're working with ecologists and local officers and things like that, and all those sorts of things come together. You've got to have your practical head on as well, and around here at least, there's a really good relationship with people like Natural England. They understand that golf courses aren't necessarily what some people would tar them with certain brushes. I'm not saying that there aren't some golf courses out there that couldn't do things a little bit better, but I mean, certainly around here, there's at least three of the courses around here that are triple SI favourable, and that means their management of their particular piece of the triple SI is up there with anyone's. And a lot of the time, that's because we've got the resources, we might have the equipment, but you've still got to have the knowledge of what you're doing with that equipment, when timings and things like that. And so, yeah, I think we're rightfully proud in this area of kind of the relationship we have with Natural England, because it's all based on sort of mutual understanding that everyone's got their agenda, but ultimately everyone's going for the same thing. And a golf course that's triple SI favourable ultimately is a nice place to be. And I think a lot of our members, we quite often have a members talk where the officer from Natural England's come in and explained just how special it is, these sorts of places. And while sometimes tree removal, vegetation removal, it might seem dramatic, it might seem quite stark and things like that. It's just illustrating that it's the balance, and it's actually prioritizing what the priority habitat or the priority species is in that particular place. It might be, we have done a lot of tree thinning, we've done a lot of tree removal, we do a lot, I think in years gone by, a lot of kind of vegetation removal and work like that's been done by hand, and it's been quite laborious, and quite often, for example, people don't remove tree stumps and things like that, and you get a lot of regrowth. What we've tried to do is try to buy small machines like small excavators and be able to move little pieces like that with grapples, being able to remove it all, and actually really just do things slowly, meticulously, make sure that those sorts of bits aren't going to return. But I mean, from a practical point of view, we're always trying to work away on basic cultural things with surfaces or anything like that. For me, like greens are like looking after kids. it's very easy to overlook basic cultural things like if a kid was tired or hungry, or there's lots of things with greens like light and air and things like that are really fundamental things. And a lot of surf clubs had trees planted in the 60s and 70s. We're no different, but a lot of those trees were planted with no management plan, no plans for aftercare or thinning, or what those trees might do to playing surfaces with casting shade and restricted airflow and root growth and blocking drains and all these sorts of things. So fundamentally, we're no different to anybody. We've tried really hard to look at what we think the major threats are in terms of climate change. It might be, you look crazy. You look crazy sometimes. One minute you go in looking for money for irrigation, the next minute you're doing it for drainage. But fundamentally, I think water on and water off the golf course for any golf course of any kind is what the main focus for a lot of clubs seems to be, and that's just trying to deal with. We might not necessarily be getting more rain over the course of 12 months, but when that rain comes along, it just seems to come in huge dumps of water, and actually removing that volume of water in less time, and then obviously these periods of drought that seem to sort of intersperse them. It's just going to be a very different, looking after golf courses, in my opinion, is going to be a very different ball game to what we perhaps grew up doing 20-25 years ago, when we had lots of frost. We put the machines away from October to February. It's just not the case anymore. Everything's still going. We've had our first outbreak of dollar spot in the northwest that we've seen. You kind of keep an eye on people that in other parts of the country. You understand it's moving up through the Channel Islands, the south of England, maybe Lincolnshire, and then the Midlands, and then you're thinking it's not going to be long. But up to this year, we'd not blanket sprayed a fungicide for 6 or 7 years, and that was a testament to some of the stuff we'd done with fine grasses and like cultural controls. But no, we've sprayed one this year. We've had an outbreak of dollar spot. So I think you've always got to be mindful that you can do all these things, but actually quite quickly climate and different factors change, and that's looking after golf courses. It's never the same. It's never the same one day to the next, let alone 1 year to the next. I mean, even in this sort of space of time, some of the investments and the forward thinking nature of the club is really to be applauded. And I think a lot of that, from a club point of view, comes down to governance and the way the club's run, and how people are very invested, but I think that comes from the fact that they have quite long terms of office compared to other people. I have some people on my green committee who'll be on it for 6 or 7 years, maybe longer, and they'll be chair of green for 2 or 3 years. So where at a club, if somebody was in those positions for a year or so, for example, they might not want to take on some dirty work that was going to cause inconvenience to members, and it might be very tempting to bump it down, kick the can down the road to the next person. That's not really the case here. They're happy to go with what professionals and consultants and contractors tell them, and I think that's why we have got through so many of these different projects, and they have really understood the benefits of it. I mean, ultimately, right back at the start, this sort of vision and this plan to do a lot of these things was one of those things where you just go, look, this is what I feel is the right thing to do, backed by fellow professionals, consultants, etc. But ultimately, it's for the club to agree to and understand. But that comes with you telling them all of what they're in for. Not sugarcoating any of it, and understanding, and saying within reason, not just to the committees, but obviously when you communicate with members, you've got to be honest. You might not give out every last bit of information, but you'll give out enough information to help people understand that it's short-term pain, long-term gain. I think that's my most overused phrase in the last 9 or 10 years, and but it's absolutely true. There's so many things where you've got to commit the time to communicate with people, whether it's newsletters, little videos, members' evenings, course walks. We've done them all, and certainly back when some of the more intensive work was going on across the whole site, you've really got to be sort of forward facing and get ready to answer any questions that come your way. And even if you feel like there isn't a build up of tension or something like that, it's still important just to keep ahead of it and just keep, because that's how people understand it. And but ultimately you've got to deliver results as well. It's one of those things where we did have periods in the early time of it where we were reducing the organic matter and trying to get more fine grass in, but turning the screw the other way slowly doesn't come without pain. We had bits of anthracnose and different things. It was difficult, and but you feel like you've got to have told members that might happen, but it's just, and you've always got to answer questions, and some people would say, is this working? Is this? And you would say, well, look, where you might have to say, okay, well, where else have you played? Oh, well, it's they've done it at such and such club. They've had positive results. We would go and see other clubs with committee members and different things. We'd go and visit people, and ultimately, yeah, it's been, there's definite challenges around that side of it, but I think slowly but surely, you start to get results and people start to trust your judgment, and it just builds and builds. And touch wood, we're kind of getting to the period now where we've done a lot of these projects. We're still always working away, but people now understand what it was all about and what kind of balance we're looking for, and there has been that slow build of appreciation as to actually, okay, this place has been sort of transformed, not just in how it looks and plays, but actually, there's still a huge amount of people that will never see some of the stuff that's been done, because it's the stuff that I always say it's the stuff beneath the waterline on the iceberg. The golfers play on the little bit that sticks out the top, and without all this work on everything that's under there, which is what all these things do, and underpinning it all just crumbles. There's so many things like irrigation, drainage. It's buried in the ground. It's worth a fortune, but it's buried in the ground. They never see it, and that's why so many clubs, those parts of their infrastructure, do sometimes get into disrepair, and they can't. People, despite trying the best, course managers can't always get that kind of level of investment in the rotation that they want. So yeah, but ultimately there's always something. The next thing's always on the horizon, isn't it? When we got like a reasonable amount of the way through the process, and I started to think about some of the things we've done. Sometimes when you're putting together a newsletter or a talk, and you go through all the things, and you realise, God, we've done a lot. We've done a lot of stuff. And I don't know who I was talking to at Harrogate one year, and somebody said, "Why on earth haven't you entered the Golf Environment Awards?" And I just, me being me, I just don't have time. And he said, "Why do you think I should?" And I think, she was kind of like, yeah, absolutely, he said that you've done this. I think it was one of our agronomists or something at the time. And I was like, oh yeah, maybe you're right. And then obviously you start to write the application, and you think about some of the things, there's so many different bits that have gone into that. Yeah, and you do. No, for me, I wanted that more for the team and the club, to understand how much they put into it. And sometimes a lot of them have worked here a long time, and it's not that they don't appreciate it, but they don't really understand how special it is sometimes. It's not till sometimes you go and visit other places that they realise just how special it is. But it's important, to stop and look at what you do, because we're always, this time of year especially, in 20 years ago, this would have been the sort of time of year where you were sort of thinking about slowing down and doing some projects, and golf would quieten down a bit. But on a site like this, golf just never really quietens down. Lots of the inland courses, when they become a little bit softer and wetter at this time of year, our tee sheet just fills up, So it's just it's a bit non-stop really. So you don't always get a chance to stop that much. So yeah, no, it was just more that members of the clubs and committees where they really understood just how important some of the work was, but how good some of the team are, and how good how we compare to other places. But those awards are great as well. That our guys are getting to sit at those awards and listen to some of the other stories and understand that people were in the same boat as them, and all working with different resources, and some of the little things people have done, and get lots of like-minded people. That's great. And you get a lot of people now. A lot of the guys are in my ear already. What we going to do at Harrogate this year? And like in the years gone by, it wouldn't always have gone or understood what was involved in things like that. But they get a lot more involved, and they understand that actually along the way, some of the accolades and the different things, like the course was never in the England top 100, and there's three England top 100 rankings. We were never in any of them. We're in them all now, and we're reasonably solid in there. So I think it's just been a bit of an awakening for the club and the property and everything. But it's also getting people to understand this is actually somewhere really great to come to play and to work and everything like that. There's a lot of special places on this coast, but there's this place as a property as a whole is massively special, and it's still got a lot of things that can be done to keep kind of unlocking a lot of its potential. There's always work to do on golf courses, but I mean, there's a hell of a lot of good stuff happening. And when you get somebody like that kind of saying you're triple SI favourable, that puts you in the top sort of 4 or 5% of courses in the country, like from a habitat point of view. There's obviously not many that are situated in triple SIs, and so yeah, it's good that we're only a small team of guys as well. So we're always kind of proud of what we're doing, but like everybody else, we don't always get the chance to sit back and think about it. But when you do, you realise just how much you've got through. But I know we won't be different from anybody else in that respect. But yeah, sometimes greenkeepers, we're good at talking to each other, but we're not always good at celebrating our work with the outside world. I know how much people at the club were proud of it, and in a nice kind of way, it does kind of validate what you planned to do originally, and that things are being done properly, and that there's an outside validation of that by sort of not only by Natural England, but obviously by people like awarding bodies. The irrigation project, the Horizontal Well project, was an RNA Golf Course 2030 case study as well. So there's lots of nice bits in there, but ultimately it's just equipping the place to still be here in 50 years, 100 years, whatever it may be, and making everything as responsible and sort of sustainable as it can be throughout, really. No different to anywhere. It's just doing it relative to your particular club and your particular site, and that's all we're really trying to do. And that's and that'll continue. It's all in most importantly, it's all in course policies. Certain capital projects like irrigation, drainage, they've got a cost associated with them. They absolutely have. But as I kind of alluded to before, one or two of those projects are very much a case of, can we afford not to do this? When we needed a new source of water, a more sustainable, long-lasting source of water, it was very much that we were talking about that, and we had that project underway, and we were researching it around 2018 when the drought came along, and that ultimately was just that got that over the line, because it was just kind of like, okay, we've sailed very close to the wind here. We can't, this is the main asset of the club, but we can't have that happen again. And so it was very much a case of, let's get that done. So there was lots of the infrastructure was overhauled at that point in time. Source of water, abstraction license, tanks, pumps, and then we ended up putting fairway irrigation in at the end. But ultimately, nowadays on courses like this on sand, if you've not got a reasonably good system and coverage from that system, you're going to get these massive peaks and troughs in the condition of your course, and ultimately your course is your main asset, and that's what brings in the revenue. So to go back to your original question, yes, there's capital outlays on those sorts of projects, but actually, as things have progressed and we've got and the standard of the course has improved on the back of a lot of these things, as all these sort of subsidiary projects have sort of come together, we've got on the England Top 100. We've managed to then allocate a bit more money into marketing and social media and different things, and lots more people have begun to realise not only that we're here, but what we're about, and a few of the misconceptions around us as a club kind of are addressed, and they realise, oh, actually, in its own right, this is a really proper golf course. So people are coming, and obviously that then begins to feed back. Income begins to feed back into budgets. So the budget's gone up. My maintenance budget's gone up significantly since I first came here, on the back of, a lot of those works and a lot of attention coming around to the course and the standard of the course raising. So everything sort of feeds in. And although, yeah, there are these capital projects, like we said before, any golf club, there's always a capital project, whether it's drainage, irrigation, buildings, machinery, and unless you're continually rolling your investments over and you understand where these big ticket items are and you're planning for them and you're saving for them, then if you're not doing that, you're going to be caught out financially as a club. And in this day and age of like massive costs, operational capital costs, you've got to have it nailed down. And touch wood, that's where we are now. That's having everyone at the club, loads of the directors, all the various committees, green committee, and all of my team. You don't get to sort of nailing these projects down and building the way we are without a lot of the ducks being in a row behind the scenes. Like I said before, the governance, the course policies, all those things are now sort of set in stone. So if it's me or somebody else, or if it's this current chair of green or the next one or any board member, those policies are there, and there's a line in the sand, and everyone understands that we do things a certain way. You can adapt those things, but there's development plans, there's all these different things where everyone can refer to them and understand why things are the way they are. We're transparent with members. Everyone sees the agronomy reports and different things. We look at a lot of these objective sort of targets for surface performance and things like that. But no, ultimately we've been able to generate a lot more income that goes into sort of budgets, and that's just the kind of circle that we're in, just kind of building things. And from that point of view, we're always looking on to the next things. We've managed to do a lot of drainage work and different things as well, and I think it's one of those things members understand that at an appropriate time they do expect to see some disruption, because if you don't see a little bit of disruption, like I say, you don't get good greens a lot of the time by doing nothing. Sometimes with fine grass, less is more, but there are also times where you do have to do bits of maintenance and certain things. So I think people appreciate that at certain times you do have to keep up with your infrastructure and your projects and different things. And fortunately for us, things are going in a good direction, but that's just testament to everybody pulling together, having the right people doing the right jobs, and everyone at the club having the sort of attitude that they have, and the policies that they have, and long may it continue. Really, I mean, it's you're polishing something that's an amazing piece of land anyway.